Painting modern roses in watercolor. Before we do our final project, I want everybody to practice creating these modern roses in your watercolor pad. You might have to use a couple of pages, but I just want you to be really comfortable with the process. Our first step would be to create several color mixes. So you can want to make a mix of Q rose, a mix of red, a mix of one of your yellows, maybe your darker yellow, it might show up a little more, maybe a violet or a red violet, but just create a few different mixes. I would say probably a level 4 or 3, because we're going to start out dark and intense and then use water to lighten it up. Please use your large pointed round brush or your medium-sized round brush. Whatever one you choose, we want to make sure it has a nice point, but we also want to make sure that we can spread out the paint really well. Here's what you need to do. For the middle of the rose, the smallest part, you're going to create a C. You're going to have enough paint on that tip of your brush. It's not going to be super watery. It's going to be like a level 3, maybe a 4, and you're going to create a C. Then you're going to create another C, cupping that C off to the side. And then you're going to create a larger C around those C's on each side. And you will continue to do this for a little while. Make sure the white spaces in between are not too far apart. Make sure they're very close to each other and nice and tight. So now I'm going to take that same brush, I'm going to dip it in water to remove some paint, and then I'm going to tap it off a couple of times. Then I'm going to take that brush that does have a little bit of water in it, and I'm going to go to the edges of the rose, and I'm going to blend out that color with the water, and I'm going to pull it out, and I'm going to keep pulling it out, thinking about the shape of a rose. And I'm going to dip it in water again and tap it off so I can continue to start spreading out the edges so it becomes lighter and lighter, because as you know, the more water you use, the lighter the paint becomes. Another way you can do this without doing the C's is you can go ahead and make a spiral, starting small in the middle and then just going around and around for a bit. And then you kind of just start creating those C's around that. And you just spread out the watercolor with the watercolor brush. And then you're going to go ahead and dip it in water to lighten it out, and that way you can spread out those edges softer, blending them softer outward. While your paint is still wet, you can dip your brush into darker pigment and you can drop in some color wet on wet just to kind of give it more interest and give it more dimension. Just play around with it. In this particular example, I went ahead and made like a little circle and almost like a little cup, and then I made a whole bunch of little C's around it. And again, to be able to blend it out, you got to dip your brush in water, tap it off a few times, and then blend out the edges to further soften it, soften those edges outward. Really, the key is just to make sure that the white spaces in between those C's are not too large. And if they are, fill them in, because everything will look better if those white spaces are a lot tighter. After your roses are dry, if you feel like you want to brighten one up, you can go ahead and just add some more pigment to it, just like I did here. Creating rose buds. First thing you want to do is grab some paint on that brush. I would probably use my medium-sized round brush. First, create a very small circle and then go down and make a half circle, and then go down again, another half circle. To fill in the rest of the rosebud, you just want to pull your brush to the right and then back to the left and then back to the right, and you're just going down as you create the entire rosebud. Speeding up the video, but I'm just going to continue to show you how I do this. Another way you can do this is just painting a couple of petals on each side and then doing your little swirl in the middle. There's so many ways that a person can create modern rosebuds, but I'm just showing you a couple of simple ways. Just keep practicing until you come up with the way you want your rosebuds to look. Our project will be modern roses in a vase or jar. If you want an extra challenge, you can always put some color around the flowers and around the vase, and you can do something else to the vase, like add water or text, anything that you choose. To create a more natural dark deep green, mix your yellow deep with your phthalo blue. If you look at your color chart, you'll go ahead and see the type of green I'm talking about. You can go ahead and add more yellow for a yellow green. You can add more blue for like a blue green, or you can just keep mixing those colors to create a really dark green. It's always good to use a few shades of green in your project. Everyone will have an illustration of the vase jar. And what I want you to do is go ahead and scribble your pencil on the back of those lines, or go ahead and use your graphic transfer paper, whichever one you choose. Make sure you put that drawing at the bottom of your watercolor sheet. Everyone should do that. That way you have enough room for the roses on the top. And then go ahead and trace the jar, the vase jar. If you don't have your color mixes ready, go ahead and do that now. And again, you want a whole bunch of different varieties of colors: orange, yellow, reds, purple, and also several different green. And again, you want to make sure you use some really nice intense color, and start with maybe a rose on the left here or the right, and make sure you do it just above the opening of the jar. You want that rose to kind of overlap a little bit at the top of the jar, and not too high up and not too low, obviously. And you're going to go ahead and create your first rose. Now you want to go ahead and make your second rose on the side of the first rose, and use a different color just to make it more interesting. Don't be shy with the size of the rose. I don't want to see little skimpy roses. Make sure they're nice and big and fluffy. So I used a rose color, I used a yellow gold, and now I'm going to use a nice purple. I think that would really look good, those three colors together. So I'm going to create the next rose above the two roses at the bottom, kind of like in the middle. Now it's time to create some rosebuds. I'm going to create one on the left side and then I'm going to create one on the right side. I'm making them a little big. I don't want them too small. So I basically only have enough room for two, but you can always squeeze another one in there if you'd like. Now it's time to add some leaves. I want you to go ahead and just look at your project as a whole and then decide where you want leaves to go. And just kind of spread them out a little evenly, big leaves, small leaves. But just really think about your design of the whole project before you lay down those leaves. I actually used leaves that had a little bit more blue in it, and some had a little bit more yellow green. And so, you know, it's kind of good to just use a few different color greens to make it more interesting. I decided to add a few thin flower stems because I felt that it'd be nice to add a little touch of small flowers in there also. Again, not only do you want large leaves, but you can have some small ones in there too, just to make, again, the whole project look a little bit more interesting. These larger leaves at the bottom are overlapping the jar, and that's okay to do that. We're going to paint our jar last. I also want you to know that when I'm painting these leaves, the roses are dry. So you don't want to put wet paint near wet paint because you know what's going to happen. They're going to mix together. So now that these small stems are dry, I'm just adding some little, they're like a dark orange flower, just a little tiny flower on those stems. I'm going to add them on both sides to kind of give it some balance. As I'm looking at my project, I realize that there's a little empty space up there, so I'm just going to keep adding some more leaves here and there. Wherever I feel like there needs to be more balance, or maybe just something that just fills up that space and makes the project even more interesting. So these two leaves at the bottom are dry, so now it's time to start painting our vase jar. So I just barely picked up some like a level 1 of phthalo blue. So we're talking about super light. So it's mostly water with very little pigment. And in the middle, you don't really want darkness there. So you're going to just add mostly just water to the jar, and you're going to cover it with a light wash of water and try not to go over the lines. So now the jar's wet still, so I'm adding some more pigment, I would say like a level 3 of the phthalo blue, and then I'm going to dip my brush in some water, tap it off, and I'm going to go ahead and soften that edge. And so I'm going to do that on both sides and at the bottom of the jar. Again, adding a little bit more pigment on my brush and on some wet paint, and then I'm blending or softening it out. So around the top or the lip of the jar, I'm going ahead and adding some, like a level 3, and adding some lines there. Now I'm going to kind of make like a little circle inside the jar to make it more of a 2D effect rather than flat. That way it really looks like a jar. And again, I'm just going to add a little bit darker phthalo blue, and I'm going to blend it out or soften out the edges so it's not too harsh of a line. You just really want some softness there. So now the jar is dry. Now it's time to add some green, not very dark, probably like just a level 2. You're going to add some stems inside the jar from the flowers. Again, not too dark. I'm just finishing up my rosebuds by adding some the little green base to the bottom of each rosebud. If you want, you can add some details to the leaves of the flowers. I prefer not to, but I just wanted to show you that's something you can do. And that's it. You are done. And again, if you want to be challenged more, you can add a background. Just don't touch any of the flowers or the leaves. And you can also add some type of writing to the vase if you'd like. That's only if you want a little bit more of a challenge. If you want to do that, then go ahead and tape your watercolor paper to the table, and then you're going to go ahead and use a wet brush to wet the background, and then you add your pigment and you push it around. That would be how to do it.